We're going to begin in just a few minutes, even though people are still walking in. I want to honor the folks that are online. And at this point, I want to welcome our online participants, those that are listening to this and watching us live, as well as those who are using the recording. A number of our online regular participants, as well as a number of our sister congregations here in the Northwest Washington Synod and Spirit of Life Lutheran Church in British Columbia. And so we want to welcome all of you this morning to this last session, Speaking Truth to Power, What Would Bonhoeffer Do? And we'll begin in just a minute or two. We have a few extra copies of the Bonhoeffer biographical piece that Mark Brocker put together. Is there anybody that did not get a copy of that would like a copy of the Bonhoeffer biographical piece? Okay. Beth has some extra copies if you need them. There's two handouts today. One of them is 15 ways that you can get involved. This was one of the handouts or one of the documents that was in the email that I sent out earlier this week, but this is a print copy that you can take with you. The other one was not included, but I thought it was kind of a cool and interesting piece that Rick Steves put together. It's a glossary for our times, and I think you'll enjoy it and find it helpful. So the blue one is the Rick Steves glossary that he's put together. As you know, he's not just a tour consultant, but also a political activist, and is, like many of us, very concerned about the direction things are going in our country at the moment. Welcome to those of you who are here, and I know we're going to have people drifting in, but let's go ahead and begin this fourth session, Speaking Truth to Power, What Would Bonhoeffer Do? Session 4, a call to love and justice, what it means to be agents of healing and hope in these challenging times. And as we think about these challenging times, I thought of this verse from Psalm 27 that we used for the prayers of the church a couple of Sundays ago, as we think about where our strength comes from during challenging times. And I'd like you to read these words with me together. Shall we read these from Psalm 27? Wait for the Lord and be strong. Take heart and wait for the Lord. These are good words of advice as we seek God's strength and God's courage to face these challenging days. I want to start with this slide from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, whom we've been hearing about and studying during these weeks, when he said, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Silence in the face of evil is in itself evil." In the recent movie Conclave, the Cardinal Lawrence, overseeing the election of a new pope, confronts a progressive cardinal who's considered one of the front runners in the election of a pope. And that person is played by Stanley Tucci. Well, Lawrence reminds him, "This is a conclave, Aldo. It is not a war." The cardinal then explodes, "But it is a war, and you have to commit to a side." About 40% of American Christians, according to the recent Denison University survey, are embracing an alluring charismatic movement that believes we are in the midst of a spiritual war between the forces of good and evil. Their leaders call this the New Apostolic Reformation. They believe that we are in a battle for the very soul of America. And the very demonic powers they must fight against are not only religious, but they are political as well. The church is the army of God that seeks to destroy the secular state and has little use for religious pluralism, individual rights, or constitutional democracy. In the February issue of The Atlantic, journalist Stephanie McCrummen reports on her research about this group, suggesting that while the secular establishment has struggled to take all of this seriously, Trump has harnessed this apocalyptic energy to win the presidency twice, and leaders in this movement have anointed him as an instrument of God. House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Southern Baptist, displays a Revolutionary War banner outside his office. It's a white flag with a green pine tree and the words, "An appeal to heaven." It has become the battle flag for the Christian right. This movement claims that God is on their side, and anyone opposed to them is evil and an instrument of Satan. There's a fundamental shift in American Christianity, according to McCrummen and other scholars like Ryan Burge and Robbie Jones, who claim that Christians are becoming more radical. They are taking on the extreme beliefs that give them a sense of power and control. For example, 42% of American Christians now agree with the statement that God wants Christians to stand atop the 7 mountains of society, that is, to take control of the government, education, business, family, the arts, media, and religion itself, what they call the 7 mountains of society. These Christian nationalist ideas have influenced the right-wing agenda of Project 2025. Catherine Stewart's latest book, Money, Lies, and God, Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy, does the essential work of exposing how a combination of wealth, right-wing institutions, and religious nationalism combined into a toxic brew that gives us the current political regime. In the introduction, Stewart identifies 5 forces driving the destruction of our democracy. The funders, billionaires and shadow donors financing the operation. The thinkers, ideological architects shaping anti-democratic policies and messaging like the Heritage Foundation originators of Project 2025. The sergeants, local and state level operatives pushing the movement forward, such as school board activists and election deniers. The infantry, the mass base of radicalized followers convinced that they are in a holy war. And the power players, an unholy alliance of charismatic leaders and political figures consolidating their power. Look at this quote. "Beware of anyone in authority who is stoking fear, hate, and aggression into the hearts of their followers, for they are only interested in their own power. Seek out instead those who are stoking love, kindness, and compassion into the hearts of others while empowering the most vulnerable." You see the contrast. Frederick Clarkson, a senior research associate who tracks such movements, warns that this movement that has continued to rise, gathering political strength, attracting money, and gaining followers, and the broad center left doesn't understand what is happening, end quote. The movement aligns with many of the goals of the Christian right, including a total abortion ban and an end to gay marriage and LGBTQ rights, because they view the traditional family as the fundamental unit of God's perfect order. The movement has become a vast political machine with apostles and prophets speaking for God and deciding which candidates and policies advance the kingdom. It has no use for democracy, but prefers an authoritarian government that will carry out its goals. The movement has never been about policies or changes in the law. It's always been about the larger goal of dismantling the institutions of a secular government to clear the way for the kingdom. It's about God's total victory. Again, in contrast, they draped the cross in the American flag and called it faith. Preached Jesus but bowed to power. Turned the gospel into a weapon and called it patriotism. This isn't Christianity, it's idolatry. If your church serves a political party more than the poor, it's not a church, it is a cult. And this one, the moment we Christians start looking, the moment we Christians start looking for an authoritarian strongman to lead us is the moment we stop looking for the one who leads by washing feet, who rides a donkey instead of a war horse, and who tells his followers to put away their swords and take up their crosses instead. The scenario that I've laid out is chilling, but unfortunately true. Many believers today have been seduced by images of a vengeful God who wants believers to be instruments of retribution, revolution, and cleansing. Not unlike many of the Jewish peasants who lived under the oppressive rule of the Romans in the first century, they were looking for one of their own to lead them into battle, an earthly king who would give them victory over their enemies. A number of Jesus' disciples were members of the Zealots, members of a Jewish nationalist party that advocated for resistance and even rebellion against Roman rule. Jesus came to announce a different kind of kingdom, the reign of love and mercy. Instead of an army, he wanted to raise up ambassadors for the gospel, agents of healing and hope. Keep in mind the company that Jesus kept. He did not spend time rubbing shoulders with the elite in power. He could not be found among the priestly class in the temple, nor among the rulers in Herod's palace. He spent time among the marginalized, the poor, the sick, the adulterers, the lepers, the outcasts of society, showing mercy and compassion. Following Jesus, that is following a leader who remained humble, never got rich, eschewed military might, refrained from using force, consistently supported the vulnerable, and never exploited power for personal gain. Robbie Jones, author of The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy and a Path to a Shared American Future, calls out any form of Christianity that is divisive, vengeful, unjust, and not following Jesus' admonishment to love and care for the neighbor, whoever they may be. He writes, "There's an old heresy now recirculating in some Christian circles that empathy is antithetical to the gospel. We can point out that previous purges of empathy as a Christian virtue among white Christians in America prepared the ground for disastrous actions such as the genocide of the indigenous peoples and the enslavement of people of African descent. This belief justified unimaginable cruelty to fellow human beings who were children of God, and it is the same rationale that allowed German Christians to turn a blind eye to the persecution of Jews and others during Hitler's reign of terror." Captain Gilbert, an Army psychologist who was assigned to watching the defendants at the Nuremberg trials, wrote this: "In my work with the defendants at the Nuremberg trials, I was searching for the nature of evil, and I now think I have come close to defining it. a lack of empathy. It's the one characteristic that connects all the defendants, a genuine incapacity to feel with their fellow men. Evil, I think, is the absence of empathy. Fast forward to what is happening in Washington, D.C. Fast forward to what is happening in Washington, D.C. with the impact of recent budget cuts on millions of Americans. First, given the reach of Medicaid, the Kaiser Foundation notes Medicaid is the primary program providing comprehensive health and long-term care to 1 in 5 people living in the United States. Medicaid not only covers the poorest Americans, but seniors, long-term health care, drug addicts, and the disabled. Especially hard hit will be the rural hospitals already facing economic disaster. And as if that were not bad enough, Trump has ordered funding for food banks and senior meals on wheels to cease, and $230 billion is to be cut from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. Those changes amount to slashing funds from a program that helps more than 40 million people, including 1 in 5 children, afford groceries. Not to mention massive cuts to Pell Grants, school lunches, and Head Start. All of this is designed to give the richest people like Musk and others even more tax cuts. And not surprising that on February 28th, Elon Musk said on the Joe Rogan show that empathy is the fundamental weakness of Western civilization. Let me say that again. Elon Musk said on the Rogan show, empathy is the fundamental weakness of Western civilization. Perhaps in some twisted way, the empathy void allows some believers today to not feel pangs of guilt or sadness to the sufferings of others, including immigrants living in terror of deportation, the less fortunate losing their health care, and children going hungry. Imagine cheering on people in power who are actively targeting and harming the hungry, the poor, the sick, the elderly, the veteran, the disabled, the different, the stranger, and still somehow expecting people to believe you follow Jesus. And Rabbi Abraham Heschel writes, the prophets sought to convey that morally speaking, there is no limit to the concern one must feel for the suffering of human beings, that indifference to evil is worse than evil itself, that in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. Which begs the question, how will we live out our baptismal calling to love the neighbor, show compassion, act for justice in these challenging times? Perhaps if empathy is a sin, quoting Luther, we will sin boldly. Rather than letting Christian nationalism and the far right define what it means to be Christian in America, we can offer an alternative vision of what it means to follow Jesus. We can start by returning to the book of Acts for our model. In chapter 2, we learn about life among the believers in the early church. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all and any who had need. Day by day, as they spent time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all people. And day by day, the Lord added to their numbers those who were being saved. You may have heard that it was said by the general population, not just the believers, the general population in those early days of the faith would say, see those Christians and how they are known by their love and their generosity. This is the story of a fledgling faith that sought to live out the command of Jesus to love others in tangible ways. They took care of the poor, the sick, the widow, and the orphan, because in those days there was no safety net for the unfortunate. Fast forward to the spread of Christianity in America. Whether it was the Catholics, the Lutherans, or others, what was the first thing people of faith did when they came to this country and settled in various communities? They built a church, a school, and a hospital. Today, that legacy of caring continues through the work of organizations like Lutheran World Relief, Lutheran Disaster Relief, Global Refuge, and closer to home, Lutheran Community Services of the Northwest. Lutherans make quilts, manage food banks, participate in local feeding programs, resettle refugees, and work on affordable housing projects. These are tangible ways that we seek to live out our faith in action by being generous, caring, compassionate people. That is what the world needs to see now more than ever. That is what we must keep on doing in spite of the slanderous comments by this administration and the loss of federal funds. For this is the Lord's work. So let us choose love, let us choose inclusion, let us choose empathy, let us choose compassion. So the question that is uppermost in our minds during these times of political and religious upheaval is, what can we do? This is where faith hits the road. Richard Rohr suggests that what is called is a movement of love and liberation. He cites two contemporary women theologians. First, Sally McFay, who writes, "At the center of Jesus' message as a prophet and wisdom teacher is a vision of a world as an egalitarian community of beings, not a hierarchy of individuals." No class system there. Jesus suggests a way of living in the world where all are valued, especially the vulnerable and the outcast. He shows us how to live this message by his own practice of living among the marginalized and siding with those considered inferior by conventional standards. He tells us when and where to do it, here and now. It is not a matter of intellect or will, but of the heart. And then she concludes by citing examples of those who have followed Jesus most radically, including people like Dorothy Day, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, and many others who passionately loved both God and the world. Some of us are old enough to remember the Jesus movement of the 70s. Dr. and Reverend Carter Hayward writes of a new Jesus movement that we are called to participate in the midst of the suffering and violence, which is the context of our common life. This movement, she says, is constantly generating a revolutionary spirit of freedom and revolution and liberation. We cannot enjoy a spirituality that is truly of God unless we participate in the struggle for justice. That is, a struggle for love, compassion, nonviolence, and forgiveness in this world. And we cannot stay in the struggle, she says, unless we are drawing personal strength from the God whom Jesus loved. Jamar Tisby, an African-American pastor and scholar, offers some good advice when the world feels unstable. He writes, "The unfortunate reality is that we cannot, at least in the short term, stop much of the horribleness coming from the White House. But that does not mean we have to be mere spectators at the collapse of democracy in the United States. When we cannot control much of what happens externally, we have to focus on who we are internally, to focus on values, virtues, and character. We may not have been directly affected yet," he says, "but we are already in the shadow of the tidal wave that looms over every community in this nation. In this moment, we have a decision to make. What kind of character, what kind of virtue, what kind of values will define us in this moment. Tisby then reflects on the character and values defined in Scripture when St. Paul writes, "The fruit of the Spirit is joy, love, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." He then goes on to suggest 3 ways we can cultivate the fruit of the Spirit. One is to pray. We ask God to grow the fruit of the Spirit within us. Second is to ponder. We meditate on the fruit of the Spirit to better understand what it means and how it manifests that Spirit in our lives. And to practice. The fruit of the Spirit manifests and matures through consistent practice. And practice is not about perfection, it is about persistence. In a world bent on chaos, practicing the fruit of the Spirit becomes an act of defiance and hope. To quote Heather Cox Richardson, the dismantling of our constitutional order, detentions and disappearances, the bullying of allies, disabling of the global order, the grift, the cruelty, the lies, we know where this is, or what this is, and where it leads. So, let's turn to some practical things then about what we can do in these uncertain times. In addition to practicing the fruit of the Spirit, we need not give in to the chaos, to not let ourselves be overwhelmed, to not fear for the future. We need to trust in God's love and care, and we need to hang on to hope. From the sheet that is on your table that was also emailed to you, 15 ways to survive and thrive in uncertain times, I have a short summary here for you. First of all, we need to take care of ourselves. We need to practice self-care. We need to get the rest that we need to stay healthy and strong, to do things that feed our soul, such as spend time with friends and family, to worship, pray, attend the theater, go for a walk in the woods, work in the dirt, listen to music. Secondly, we need to find ways to reach out and care for those in need, whether it be volunteering to feed the hungry in our community or donating to a worthy cause like Global Refuge or Lutheran Disaster Relief. 3, we can fight for our democracy to ensure religious freedom and opportunity for all in this country. And again, some examples from 15 ways to fight for democracy. Suggest join a pro-democracy group, organizing to fight authoritarianism. Grassroots organizing is where the real power lies. Second, register to vote. Know who's on the ballot at every level and be sure to vote. Use your professional expertise to help fight for democracy. Write an op-ed, film TikToks, record an Instagram reel, speak publicly about how what is happening impacts you and your community. Organize and participate in mass boycotts. Participate in local protests. Support strategic litigation efforts that challenge unlawful actions by donating to organizations on the front line, such as the American Civil Liberties Union and the Southern Poverty Law Center. And finally, hold your lawmakers accountable. Show up at town meetings, email or call your congressional representatives. And these are the representatives that you know about. Our 2 senators, Patty Murray and Marie Cantwell, our Rick Larson, congressman here in Everett, and for those listening in our online today, we have the 2 representatives from the Seattle area. Those phone numbers and emails will be sent to you tomorrow, so you'll have those. You don't have to copy them today. Also keep in mind, as we think about what's going on nationally, that there are more people who are concerned about what's going on, like you and I. In fact, 2/3 of Americans say hands off the Department of Education, the National Park, the Postal Service, the Defense Centers for Disease Control. 2/3 of most people are saying, please do not dismantle our government. It's doing an important work. And then I ran across this quote from Senator Margaret Chase Smith, who spoke during the McCarthy hearings of the 1950s. She was from Maine. She was a Republican, and she said, I do not want to see the Republican Party ride to political victory on the four horsemen of calumny: fear, ignorance, bigotry, and smear, she said. As an American, I condemn a Republican fascist just as much as I condemn a Democratic communist. They are equally dangerous to you and to me and to our country. And as an American, I want to see our nation recapture the strength and unity it once had when we fought the enemy instead of ourselves. Senator Smith ended with a warning. It is high time that we all stop being tools and victims of totalitarian techniques that, if continued here unchecked, will surely end what we have come to cherish as the American way of life. I close with this passage that Jesus read from the scroll of Isaiah in the synagogue of his hometown in Nazareth during the time of great upheaval. It was his way of announcing his mission and purpose in the world as he proclaims, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because God has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. God has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." This sounds like an inauguration speech. Economic policy, legal reforms, medical advances, a liberation movement. But it's not public policy, it's God's grace. Jesus has no political office or plans for power. He lives, in fact, under brutal oppression that will stay brutal for generations. He's not launching a campaign, but a ministry, an insurrection of gentleness, a revolt of kindness. It's something that you and I are anointed to, not elected to. For under the thumb of Caesar, we live in the empire of grace. It is we, not the emperor, who will do justice and love mercy. Surely we will lobby, we will vote, we will advocate, we will protest, we will support those in need, and we should not wait. We ourselves must embody the coming of God's favor. Like Jesus, we may soon be hauled to the edge of a cliff, but like him, we will survive. For those baptismal waters have anointed us to be good news to the poor, release, to be new sight and freedom for others, to be God's grace. But not on our own, for it is God who anoints us, who does the Lord's work through us, while the Spirit encourages us onward. So we keep on fighting for the good, we keep showing up, we keep loving, we keep giving back, we keep being kind, we keep being brave, we keep caring, we keep trying new things, we keep showing grace, we keep on. And I close with these words from Dietrich Bonhoeffer from his sermon on 2 Corinthians. Christianity shines or stands or falls with its revolutionary protest against violence, arbitrariness, and the pride of power, with its plea for the weak. Christians are doing too little to make these points clear rather than too much. Christendom adjusts itself for too easily to the worship of power. Christians should give more offense, shock the world far more than they are doing now. Christians should take a stronger stand in favor of the weak rather than considering first the possible right of the strong. So Bonhoeffer has good words for us. Jesus has good words for us, and it's time for you to have good words for one another. I'd like to invite you to have some table conversation for a little while, and then we'll come back together. And I have a few questions for you to talk about at your table this morning. You can choose a couple. You can try to get through all four. But these are the questions that I would suggest those of you who are listening online, as well as those here in the room, have some conversation about. First of all, what have you heard or read that gives you a sense of urgency or concern? Second, what does it mean to follow Jesus in these turbulent times? 3, as you think about attacks on religious freedom and defunding of human services, what do you think is an appropriate response for the church or for you as an individual? And finally, how do you plan to take care of yourself instead of giving in to fear or despair? Have some good conversation, and I'll call you back in a little while.
That yeah, we got the middle finger from a number of people, but that didn't seem to bother anybody. We had hundreds of more people that honked their horns, thumbs up, clapped. Just I would say, and from my personal standpoint, it felt good to do something other than just talking. It felt good to me, and all the people around me said the same thing. And I would strongly recommend.
Thank you, Gordon. We have time for maybe one or two others.
I would like to thank Beth for what she put in the Facebook. That was wonderful. And if you haven't read it, she should put it in again so you could read it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know what it was because I post lots of things. I didn't get it.
We'll continue to post, but also, as I mentioned, I'll be sending out a few emails tomorrow as a follow-up to today's discussion and really kind of wrapping up our 4 weeks of conversation. Nancy,
I
please.
just wanted to thank you so much for your course. It's been wonderful. And I can tell that you're really fired up about this.
Yeah.
And that Seattle Indivisible is having a big protest next Saturday also at the Seattle Center from 12 to 3 p.m.
Okay.
So that's another protest.
Thank you, Nancy. You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, this is, as you know, these are important times. And I think it's also, you can tell my passion that it's important for us as Lutheran Christians to let people know that there is an alternative to the kind of the popular view right now of American Christianity that has been this kind of conflation of patriotism and Christianity, which is not really what Jesus was about. We're about following Jesus. We're about compassion. We're about empathy. We're about caring for the unfortunate. We're about standing up for democracy. We're about, standing up for what we believe to be grace, the cornerstone of our faith. So keep on standing up and keep on keeping on as we are doing as Lutherans. And, again, the wonderful T-shirt that you wore again today, the Lutheran Crime Syndicate, because we care about people and we care about fairness and freedom. Here's the closing prayer. I invite you to join with me. You'll recognize it. It is the prayer from St. Francis. Let's read this together as we close. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. God bless you in the week to come.